Hello and welcome. I'm Paul from Mostly Off Topic, and we're here for 10 Minute Monsters, where we cover Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition monsters. This episode, we're talking animated objects, and unlike your normal monster review, we're not going to talk about how to use these in an encounter particularly. We're not going to talk massively about the stats. We're going to talk about what do we learn about the Dungeons and Dragons kind of standard world, implied world, and kind of riffing off some of the stuff that's kind of written about these monsters, give some ideas for some encounters or campaigns, or how they can kind of like be put into the world, basically. So animated objects are exactly what it says there, and the monster manual kind of gives three examples: animated armor for classic, a flying sword, and rug of smothering. So all of these objects are created with potent magic, and they follow the commands of their creators. That's potent magic not available in the player's handbook to start with. They can be commanded, otherwise they kind of go ahead. They can act independently, and interestingly, depending upon where in the multiverse the kind of animated object is created, you can get differential and better effects and impacts from it. So it kind of makes me wonder whether, are sentient creatures around the multiverse taking advantage of that fact? Does a forge build up around a particular kind of like area of the elemental plane of fire, where you can kind of really get the best types of flying sword that hit with the most efficacious kind of combat? Some flying flame tongues or something like that. Are there kind of like the Eladrin gathered around glades in the Feywild, where you can kind of create these personifications of kind of creatures, these animated objects like that. The gene is the rug from Aladdin. Is that a creature of the Feywild? And do the Eladrin kind of like wage war between the Eladrin of the seasons to try to control these things? So I think that's quite an interesting kind of little implication of the text animated objects, and it strikes that gods of the forge or kind of artificers gods will possibly kind of grant their mortal followers some of these benefits. So if an object is animated in a temple of that particular god, then they get advantageous kind of like effects, and therefore that kind of helps that faith kind of establish itself in the world and kind of become important in the world. It also makes me wonder whether do the elves inflame kind of like dwarven sensitivities by comparing the dwarven race to nothing more than an animated object crafted and created by Moradin, where they themselves are kind of like in the blood of Corellin. I can imagine that there'd be a tense kind of point in some elf dwarf kind of like negotiations. I'm sure that Legolas and Gimli just kind of chose to agree to disagree on that point. All in. And it says here, adopt a persona, kind of, they could converse. So you can get a whole born not made kind of vibe on the go as well. Kind of like Blade Runner in Waterdeep, perhaps. But there we go. So there's not much more to kind of like say about them than kind of that. They get deactivated if they're in a kind of anti-magic or a dead magic field. They are identical to the object that they are when they're not animated. Fairly solid D&D design, and they behave pretty much as you would expect, to be perfectly honest. I guess the one downside with kind of like animated objects is that you can start to kind of hack off your kind of players when random bits of furniture come alive and start laying into them. So you want to drop some clues. If you go to an artificer's den, then maybe you should be just aware of these things. So how can we build a campaign around kind of like animated objects, or how can we kind of make them a little bit more than just standard kind of sneaky enemies, I guess. So just imagine a world it's been bereft of magic. The goddess of magic has been absent for aeons, and then lo and behold, the goddess of magic has returned. There is joy throughout the land, up until the point when all the heavy armor kind of starts to animate because magic has come back and they're no longer in an anti-magic shield, effectively. They're no longer and they just start terminating things. chose that word very deliberately. So you have a campaign there, which is some form of Skynet. The joy of the goddess of magic. Why did you come back again, love? And the battle against those kind of like those Terminators. Or perhaps you could try and decide to make some of these creatures kind of like large, again, kind of riffing off the armor, or larger, and stick on some repeating crossbows or maybe some wands, and then you're facing off against the gnomes and their battlemechs. And the gnomes are coming out of their warrens and their burrows, and they're laying into people, kind of like in these kind of like small attack kind of like walkers. I think that would be quite a cool take, and quite an interesting kind of like riff. You could build it into a little bit of world building. I've touched on the Made Not Born Chronicle, kind of Blade Runner in Waterdeep. You kind of got to hunt down these kind of like replicants or what have you. You can do that with kind of other things. You could have Disney's Beauty and the Beast, the cartoon in castle form, have all those objects kind of like animated, kind of out there, and just play a little bit and give some of the personas to kind of like some of the weird things. So the chipped small mug has got a kind of cheerful persona that the kind of characters want to seek to protect and not let come to harm. So that's pretty much all I've got with kind of like animated objects. Not much to say. Solid monster design can be used just kind of like as they're written, or you can start to think a little bit and extrapolate out, as I've kind of tried to riff off a little there to kind of give you a few points of direction, really. So the next we're up on to Ankeg. So I hope you kind of liked the video. If you did, subscribe to the channel, click the like button, and kind of comment below any suggestions that you can have for animated objects. I'm doing this alphabetically, but if you want a monster done out of sequence, drop me a line and I'll see what I can arrange. Thanks. Bye.